When I first set eyes on my new home in the Crescent Grove subdivision, I couldn't imagine that such a peaceful neighborhood could harbor the slightest bit of tension. The street was picture perfect: clean lawns, tidy driveways, and matching mailboxes. It was early autumn, and the leaves were just beginning to turn bright shades of orange and red. A gentle breeze rustled through the maple trees, scattering a handful of leaves across the manicured sidewalks. I'd been looking for a place that offered a break from the bustle of city life, a community where I could settle down and actually enjoy the seasons. Crescent Grove fit that bill. My house sat on a corner lot, complete with a small fenced backyard and a cozy front porch, just the right spot for sipping morning coffee and waving to neighbors passing by. And, of course, it was governed by a homeowners association, but in my experience, HOAs mostly concerned themselves with lawn care or trash can rules. At worst, they could be a bit overbearing with landscaping guidelines, but that seemed like a small price to pay for a well-maintained neighborhood. Little did I suspect that I was about to meet Lauren Baxter, an HOA board member some folks secretly nicknamed Karen. The story was that, years ago, she'd thrown a huge fit at a local store over a return policy and demanded to speak to the manager. Classic Karen behavior. The moniker stuck, and soon enough, many neighbors used it behind her back. Lauren was in her late 40s or early 50s, with carefully styled hair that barely moved when she turned her head, a fiercely determined gaze, and a knack for intimidation whenever she decided something wasn't to her liking. I first encountered her at a neighborhood meet and greet that the HOA hosted. It was the first Saturday after I'd moved in, and they'd set up folding tables on a wide green space near the community pool. People brought potluck dishes, salads, casseroles, brownies, while a local singer performed easy listening covers. It felt relaxed, a friendly start to life in Crescent Grove. Not long after I arrived, someone waved me over to a group of board members. Lauren Karen Baxter stood among them, wearing a crisp blouse and slacks, clipboard in one arm. She exuded an air of authority, and her smile, though polite, seemed a bit tight around the edges. "So, you're the new homeowner on Birchwood Drive?" she asked as I shook her hand. "That's me," I replied. "I'm Will Thompson. Nice to meet you." She gave a curt nod and studied me with the intensity of someone sizing up a potential rival. "We're happy to have you here," she said, her tone carrying just a hint of condescension. "I'm on the HOA board, and I handle community events, especially holiday ones. Are you a big fan of Halloween?" I grinned. "Oh yeah, I love it. Usually, I put out pumpkins, maybe a couple of spooky decorations. Nothing too extreme, but I enjoy the holiday vibe." Her expression flickered briefly. "Well, here in Crescent Grove, we take seasonal themes very seriously. We aim for a cohesive neighborhood look. We have a set color palette and recommended decor guidelines for each holiday, including," she paused, "Halloween." My grin faltered at her emphasis. "Oh, that's, interesting." The mention of guidelines gave me a mild sense of foreboding, but I tried to remain polite. "I'll be sure to check them out." "Excellent," she declared. Then someone called her name from across the lawn, and she excused herself, already pivoting toward another conversation. I watched her go, slightly unsettled. But as the meet and greet continued, neighbors introduced themselves, telling me which houses they lived in and offering all kinds of friendly advice. One older woman whispered conspiratorially, "Careful with Lauren. She's sweet as sugar until you cross her. Then she can get downright nasty." I gave a half smile, unsure how serious the warning was. All I knew was that I adored Halloween, from the carved jack-o'-lanterns to the fake cobwebs and plastic skeletons. If the HOA wanted everyone to follow some theme, I could probably compromise, right? A week passed. My boxes were mostly unpacked, and I'd begun settling into a comfortable routine. I worked from home a few days a week, so I got to see the neighborhood in daylight. People walked their dogs or jogged, maintaining that pristine suburban picture. I noticed that yards were well kept, most with standard flower beds and a few ornamental shrubs. Then came the monthly HOA newsletter in my mailbox. I flipped through it, reading about new paint color options for garage doors, the schedule for leaf collection, and a politely worded notice about trash bin placement. Near the end, one page stood out, a large heading: Halloween decor requirements and theme. My eyebrows rose. Requirements? The text read something like, "All Crescent Grove residents are encouraged to participate in this year's official Halloween theme, Friendly Harvest." Decorations should emphasize fall colors, orange, yellow, and brown, harvest items, pumpkins, corn stalks, hay bales, and minimal spooky elements to maintain a welcoming environment. Beneath that, bold print warned, excessively frightening or gory displays, such as blood, realistic corpses, or violent imagery, are strongly discouraged and may result in HOA citations if deemed inappropriate. I stared at the words, feeling the stirrings of annoyance. Since when did an HOA get to micromanage holiday decorations so specifically? I'd expected a polite request, but this read like an ultimatum. More worrisome was the final line. Any deviation from the official theme requires prior board approval. Failure to comply may lead to fines up to $150 per week of noncompliance. That definitely got my attention. Now, I wasn't planning anything over the top, but I'd always loved a slightly eerie vibe. Fake gravestones, a motion sensor skeleton that cackled, perhaps a haunted scarecrow by the porch. Friendly Harvest sounded more like a Thanksgiving display than a Halloween celebration. Still, I decided to keep my cool. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Pumpkins and hay bales were fun too, right? 2 days later, I got an email from the HOA. The subject line read, "Reminder, submit Halloween decor plans by October 15th. My eyes nearly popped out. They wanted each household to submit a summary of planned decorations so the board could ensure compliance. I was fairly sure that any illusions I had about a laid-back approach to Halloween were now shattered. This was serious business to them, especially, I suspected, to Lauren Baxter. Trying to maintain neighborly harmony, I decided to give the HOA what they wanted, a decor plan. But I couldn't resist adding my personal touch. I wrote a short proposal. I planned to place 3 jack-o'-lanterns on my porch, a few decorative pumpkins along the walk, and a scarecrow in the yard dressed in fall attire. I may also include a small, spooky element such as a motion-activated ghost that lights up and cackles. The overall theme will be harvest colors, orange, brown, and black, and incorporate some mild Halloween flair. No gore or graphic imagery. I felt this was a fair compromise. It respected the overall harvest vibe while letting me keep some playful spookiness. I emailed it to the address provided. 3 days later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a typed letter with the HOA letterhead. Regarding your Halloween decoration plan, it began. Then it proceeded to nitpick. They suggested I avoid black in the color scheme if possible, as it might appear too ominous. They also recommended removing the motion-activated ghost, labeling it excessively frightening for young children. If I wanted a scarecrow, they asked that I refrain from giving it a menacing face. I reread the letter multiple times, feeling incredulous. A menacing scarecrow face? That's part of the fun. Also, black was too ominous. This was Halloween we were talking about. The letter concluded with a gentle threat. Kindly submit a revised plan at your earliest convenience. Failure to meet standards could result in formal citations. Suddenly, it dawned on me that Lauren Baxter was likely the author. The tone matched her controlling persona to a T. I mulled it over, trying to decide whether I should push back or fold. Part of me wanted to comply, keep the peace, maybe do a simple harvest display. But another part was outraged. This was borderline censorship. Halloween was supposed to be a time for creativity. Who was the HOA to insist on making it friendly with color-coded restrictions? I slept on it, unsure which direction to take. Maybe the best approach was to quietly put up the decor I wanted, see if they actually carried out their threats. But then I risked citations and possible fines. The last thing I needed was a legal battle with an HOA I barely knew. One thing was certain, Lauren Baxter, aka Karen, took Halloween extremely seriously. The next day, I ran into a neighbor named Marcus while jogging. We recognized each other from the meet and greet. We ended up chatting a bit about the neighborhood, and I eventually blurted, "Hey, can I ask you about Lauren Baxter? I hear she's intense." Marcus let out a dry laugh. "That's putting it mildly. She's basically the self-appointed holiday czar around here. Used to be content with dictating lawn ornaments and mailbox flowers, but Halloween is her personal crusade. She once threatened to fine me for using blinking lights in my pumpkin display, said they were a traffic distraction." I stared at him. "Blinking lights? That's it." He nodded. "Yeah, she's on a mission to preserve what she calls a family-friendly environment. In reality, it's about control. She loves to intimidate people. And if you cross her, She has no qualms about issuing citations. The rest of the board rarely challenges her. She's kind of the loudest voice there. That confirmed my suspicions, and it irked me to no end. Who elected this one person to play the tyrant over everyone's front yard fun? We parted ways, and I spent my cooling walk home pondering my next move. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that caving in would only encourage her. If no one ever pushed back, she'd keep restricting everything until the entire neighborhood looked like a sanitized HGTV fall special, minus any actual Halloween spirit. A few days passed. It was a crisp October morning, and I found myself scrolling through social media, noticing images of elaborate haunted yard setups, skeleton armies, giant spider webs, inflatables that towered over lawns. Part of me grinned. Would it be possible to do something truly memorable, yet still remain technically within the rules? Lauren's letter had demanded friendly harvest, with minimal spookiness, but the actual bylaw language on holiday decor, which I pulled from the HOA's official site, was more lenient than her letter suggested. In fact, it only mentioned that decorations must not pose a safety hazard or contain extremely graphic imagery. Nothing about banning mannequins, black colors, or mildly eerie scenes. Lauren was effectively bluffing by using the official theme as if it were law. She might interpret the bylaw to her advantage, but if I stuck to the actual text, I might have a chance. That's when I had my light bulb moment. What if I set up a creepy mannequin scene, like an old-fashioned haunted vignette, but sanitized it of gore or violence? I could turn it into a story, robed figures around a cauldron, or an eerie front porch tea party of ghostly mannequins. Something clearly Halloween-themed, yet not bloody or graphic. I could decorate them with tattered, age-worn clothing in harvest colors, orange, brown, maybe some black accent. Not a drop of fake blood or anything truly horrifying. But the visual impact would be undeniably spooky. I chuckled aloud, imagining Karen's face when she saw a row of faceless mannequins in tattered dresses, beckoning passers-by. If the decor was within guidelines, no gore, no weaponry, no insane flashing lights, she'd have trouble shutting it down. I might have to get an official permit, but I suspected the letter of the bylaw was on my side. That day, I made some calls. I found a local thrift store that carried old mannequins and dress forms. I also searched online, discovering a neighbor in a nearby town who sold used mannequins for cheap. Excitement buzzed through me. This might be my best shot at defying Karen's tyranny while still keeping it legal. Before actually hauling mannequins onto my lawn, I decided to approach the HOA with a formal request for a Halloween decor permit, just in case. Usually, for large displays, you needed to file a brief form detailing any lighting or audio components. They didn't typically require it for small sets, but I wanted every possible layer of official approval to shield me from Karen's backlash. I submitted a detailed form via the HOA's online portal. Display title: Mystery on Birchwood Drive. Proposed elements: mannequins arranged as a family in tattered autumn attire, artificial cobwebs, and a small cauldron with a fog machine. Battery-powered lantern lights. No intense strobe or loud sound. Theme: a slightly spooky but tasteful harvest gathering. I emphasized the compliance points. No gore, no blood, no horrific violence, no extremely loud noises or bright strobe effects. I even offered to shut it down by 10 p.m. so it wouldn't disturb neighbors. Less than a day later, I got an automated email confirming my application was received. Then I waited and waited. Days ticked by with no further update. Halloween was only 2 weeks away. As the date neared, I grew impatient. Was Karen blocking me? Or had the HOA simply not prioritized my request? Finally, I took matters into my own hands, showing up at the HOA office, actually a small room near the clubhouse, during its limited public hours. Inside, a bored-looking administrative assistant named Claire rummaged through a file cabinet. When I asked about my permit, she perked up. Oh yes, that's sitting on Lauren Baxter's desk for review. She was supposed to sign off on it, but she's been busy. I forced a smile. Any chance I can speak to her or get an update? Time's running short. Claire pursed her lips. Let me see if I can get her on the phone. She disappeared into a back office, leaving me in a small waiting area with a coffee machine and some stale cookies. Minutes later, she returned, looking apologetic. Lauren says she'll email you soon. She's been swamped. Sorry, I left feeling frustrated. If Karen wanted to stonewall me, she could. but she'd have to provide a reason. The official bylaws nowhere stated that my proposed display was prohibited, and if she blatantly denied it without cause, that could open the board to accusations of unfair enforcement. Deciding not to wait any longer, I took a leap of faith. I purchased 5 mannequins from a secondhand store, each missing little pieces, a hand here, half a face there, but that only added to their creepiness. Some had hinged arms that could be posed, while others were simpler torso forms. I also grabbed a handful of ratty old dresses and suits from thrift shops, heavy on the browns and oranges, so it looked harvest-themed at a glance. Over a weekend, I spent hours painting subtle shadows and aging the mannequins with fabric dyes. I used water-based paint to add the illusion of cracks or peeling skin, but carefully avoided anything too gory. Their faces, if present, were painted with hollow eyes or faint, ghostly smiles, eerie but not bloody. For the clothing, I tore edges, made them look old and tattered, and added straw poking out from sleeves to suggest a scarecrow vibe. I worked in my garage, half expecting Karen to appear at any moment with a citation. But no one bothered me. By Sunday evening, I had them arranged in a mock scene inside my garage. 3 mannequins standing around a plastic cauldron, 1 mannequin perched on a stool as if about to stir a brew, and the last one seated on a crate, hands folded in its lap. A small battery-powered fog machine nestled at the cauldron's base, ready to spill swirling mist. Battery lanterns hung from a makeshift post, casting flickering shadows. Stepping back, I felt a surge of pride. This was going to look incredible under the moonlight. Was it scary? A bit, sure. But there was no gore, just an unsettling, old-fashioned style. Technically, it was a harvest gathering, albeit with ghostly mannequins. I chuckled at the thought of Karen's reaction. Monday morning brought no word from the HOA, so I took the plunge that evening and carried out my plan. Under cover of darkness, I set up the scene on my front lawn. A neighbor out walking his dog paused to watch, wide-eyed. "That's intense," he muttered. "I like it." I nodded. "Thanks. Let's see if the HOA does." By midnight, everything was in place. I tested the lights and the fog machine. Sure enough, a soft glow lit the mannequins from below, shadows dancing across their hollow cheeks. I grinned. This was definitely a conversation starter, and I had done nothing that explicitly violated the official rules as I'd read them. The big question now, how long would it take for Karen to appear? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. The very next morning, I awoke to find an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a short, typed note on HOA stationery. Notice of violation. You are hereby notified that your Halloween display fails to align with the approved Friendly Harvest theme. The presence of multiple human-like figures in an ominous arrangement constitutes a potential disturbance to neighbors and is deemed inappropriate under Crescent Grove standards. Please remove or modify this display within 48 hours to avoid further action and possible fines. It was signed, as expected, by Lauren Baxter. A swirl of emotions hit me: annoyance, determination, even a bit of amusement. She wasted no time. But what about the permit request? I decided enough was enough. I wrote her an email, CCNG the full HOA board. Subject: alleged violation Halloween display. Hello Lauren and HOA board. I have not yet received a formal response to my permit application for the Mystery on Birchwood Drive display. The bylaw states that moderate holiday decor is allowed provided it is not excessively graphic or disruptive. My scene contains no gore, no loud audio, and is themed around a harvest gathering. The mannequins are dressed in harvest colors. I believe I'm well within regulations. I respectfully request written clarification on which specific bylaw clauses I'm violating. If none can be cited, I ask that the violation notice be rescinded. Thank you. Will Thompson. That afternoon, I heard a loud knock on my door. Peering through the window, I saw Lauren Baxter, arms folded, foot tapping. I opened the door, bracing myself. She cut right to the chase. "Mr. Thompson, we have guidelines for a reason. Your display is scaring the neighborhood. Those mannequins look like ghosts from a horror movie. We can't allow this kind of thing." I drew a calming breath. "Lauren, the official bylaws specifically mention no gore, no violent content. I have neither. This is a stylized harvest scene with a bit of spooky flair, perfectly normal for Halloween." She flushed. "It's not aligned with the Friendly Harvest theme. This is more like a haunted spectacle." I gave a small shrug. "Halloween is about the spooky factor, though. isn't it? My display doesn't harm anyone. Also, I followed procedure and requested a permit. Why was it never approved or denied officially? She glared. I don't have to explain every decision. If you don't remove those mannequins, you'll face fines, trust me. With that, she whirled around and stomped off. I stood there, adrenaline pumping. Her threat was clear, but I had a hunch she was overstepping, using intimidation rather than a firm legal basis. That very evening, an email arrived from the HOA president, Jonathan Green, announcing an emergency board meeting to discuss a decorative conflict. The meeting was set for the following night. I took that as my chance to present my side. The next day, I arrived at the community center half an hour early, armed with printed copies of the bylaws, my permit application, and photos of my display. The meeting began with Jonathan calling the session to order. Lauren sat to one side, stiff-backed, refusing to look at me. Four other board members were present, along with a small handful of residents curious about the commotion. Jonathan gave a summary of the issue. A homeowner's Halloween display had sparked controversy because it allegedly conflicted with the Friendly Harvest theme. Lauren went first, speaking with clipped precision. She handed out pictures she'd taken of my mannequins from the street, presumably, and insisted they were excessively spooky. She claimed neighbors had complained that the figures startled their children and that it was not in the spirit of the official theme. When it was my turn, I calmly stated that while the newsletter recommended a theme, the actual bylaws language on holiday decor did not ban mild spookiness or mannequins. I showed the sections about no gore, limited noise, and no bright strobe lights. I am in compliance, I declared. I also submitted a permit request, which was never formally denied. If Lauren believes it violates the theme, that's her opinion, but the rulebook doesn't say we all must strictly adhere to the theme or face fines. One board member, an older gentleman named Max, looked intrigued. He's got a point. Lauren, are we sure the official guidelines strictly prohibit mannequins? Lauren bristled. They're obviously intended to frighten people. Children shouldn't be subjected to that just walking down the street. I produced a letter from a neighbor who loved the display. Some families have actually told me they enjoy it. I've had visitors stopping by, taking photos. The mannequins are fully clothed in autumn colors. Yes, they're eerie, but that's the spirit of Halloween. Another board member, Sandra, pursed her lips. We do have to consider that the theme was recommended, not mandated, in the official monthly letter. We can't just fine someone for not following a recommendation, can we? Lauren's expression darkened. She tried to pivot, saying she was acting on behalf of community safety, suggesting that the mannequins could distract drivers. But that argument seemed flimsy, especially when the board asked if any accidents or near accidents had occurred. She had no evidence. In the end, Jonathan called for a vote on whether my display violated the official bylaw standards. To my relief, the board was split, but enough members sided with me, concluding that there was insufficient evidence to deem the decor a violation. Lauren sat fuming as they announced no immediate fine would be issued. Instead, they suggested a compromise. If I agreed to limit the lighting to certain hours and keep the display from expanding, the board would consider it acceptable. I happily agreed, figuring that was a small concession to maintain goodwill. Lauren, however, left the meeting in a huff, muttering about how the board would regret this. I knew it wasn't over, but at least for the moment, I had the official backing of the HOA. My mannequins could stay. In the following days, the reaction from neighbors was mixed, but mostly positive. Many folks stopped by to compliment the display, saying it brought an exciting Halloween vibe to Crescent Grove, which they felt had become too sanitized under Lauren's rule. Some neighbors even asked if I'd mind if they added a little spookiness to their own decorations. Meanwhile, a few seemed nervous, apparently worried about angering the unstoppable force that was Karen. One evening, while I was adjusting the fog machine, a group of trick-or-treat enthusiasts from a nearby street dropped by, praising the creativity. They snapped photos of the mannequin circle, exclaiming how it felt, so authentically eerie without being gory. But sure enough, Lauren Baxter doubled down. I saw her prowling the sidewalks, snapping pictures, presumably hoping to catch me in some alleged violation. She'd stand there, scribbling notes on her clipboard, shaking her head at any new detail. Once, I caught her examining a single plastic crow I'd placed on a scarecrow's shoulder. She glared at it like it was a personal affront. Then, a rumor floated around. She'd threatened another neighbor, Nina, who had displayed a skeleton pirate on her porch. Nina told me in hushed tones that Lauren marched up to her door, claiming it was too frightening. Nina had told her, It's just a silly skeleton with a plastic sword. But Lauren had spat back. This is not Disney World. It's a family neighborhood. Take it down before children start crying. Hearing this made me realize I wasn't alone in the struggle. Others chafed under her petty tyranny. An informal alliance formed, neighbors who wanted to push back against the overbearing holiday restrictions. They started adding more skeletons, ghosts, or small vampire bats, just to show solidarity. Nothing gory or explicit, mind you, just harmless spooks. Lauren must have been beside herself. A few nights before Halloween, I found another letter on my porch. It was from an attorney, apparently representing the HOA, though I suspected it was Lauren's personal legal contact. The letter stated that my continued disregard for the community's official Halloween theme has created undue distress and threatened to file a lawsuit if I didn't comply with the board's directives. But the letter's verbiage seemed shaky. It cited no specific code, just repeated the same arguments about family-friendly environment and excessive spookiness. I forwarded it to the HOA president and board members, asking for clarification. Within a day, Jonathan replied, clarifying that the board had not retained any attorney or approved a letter of that kind. He apologized for any confusion and acknowledged that some individuals might be acting independently. Essentially, he was implying that Lauren had overstepped her bounds by sending a pseudo-legal threat. That was enough for me. I realized Karen had no real power to enforce anything beyond normal HOA protocols. The rest of the board had already ruled in my favor. I decided to proceed with my big finishing touch. On October 30th, the night before Halloween, I placed a few additional finishing details around the mannequins, tiny flickering LED candles, a gentle thunder sound effect, kept quiet, and a small sign reading, "Welcome to the Haunted Harvest Gathering." I was prepared for Karen to storm over, but as the evening wore on, I saw no sign of her. Instead, I had a steady stream of passers-by who took pictures. Even a few kids came by, smiling instead of cowering in fear. A neighbor commented, "This is so fun. It's about time we had a real Halloween spirit around here." Finally, October 31st arrived. As dusk fell, the neighborhood came alive with trick-or-treaters. Crescent Grove was known for handing out full-sized candy bars, so families from adjacent blocks often came here to trick-or-treat. My yard, with its eerie mannequin circle, drew quite a crowd. Kids found it spooky, but in a playful way, some dared each other to stand in the circle or take selfies next to the faceless lady mannequin. I dressed up as a vintage undertaker to match the vibe, handing out candy from a bowl that glowed with flickering lights. Several times, I overheard parents say, "This is so cool, Crescent Grove usually does cutesy stuff, but this is actual Halloween." At one point, I spotted Lauren on the sidewalk across the street. She stood there stiffly, watching, expression unreadable. Then, amid the children's laughter and swirling fog, she turned on her heel and disappeared into the night, clearly displeased that so many people seemed to be enjoying what she hated. By the end of the evening, my candy supply was nearly depleted, and I was flooded with compliments. Another neighbor told me that Lauren had been complaining about me on the local online forum but garnered little sympathy. People posted pictures of my display, describing it as the highlight of Crescent Grove's Halloween. The best part was that not a single official HOA citation had been issued. Even though Lauren threatened and glowered, the board's official stance overruled her personal vendetta. The days after Halloween brought a sense of sweet relief. I began dismantling the display, storing mannequins in my garage for potential future use. It was tempting to keep them around for next year or even adapt them for other holidays. Imagine a bizarre mannequin Christmas scene, though that might be a bit too much. An official email from the board arrived, addressed to the entire community. "Thank you to all who participated in Halloween festivities. We appreciate residents decorating with creativity and respecting the guidelines, no gore, no excessive noise. We hope everyone had a safe and enjoyable evening." That was that. No condemnation of my display, no mention of fines. Lauren kept a low profile for a while. I heard from several neighbors that she was furious about the board's refusal to back her up. Some speculated she might resign from her holiday committee role, though that remained unconfirmed. Meanwhile, an unexpected side effect emerged. Other residents realized they didn't have to live in fear of arbitrary color schemes or holiday rules. They'd seen me stand my ground and come out on top. The lesson resonated. On the first weekend of November, a small group of neighbors held a post-Halloween potluck in a cul-de-sac. We shared leftover candy, told stories of trick-or-treat adventures, and joked about Karen's meltdown. Someone said, "If we all decorated the way she wanted, this place would be so boring." People laughed in agreement. It seemed that my bold move had sparked a shift in the neighborhood's mood, from tiptoeing around Lauren's demands to collectively realizing that as long as we followed the actual bylaws, we didn't have to cave to her personal preferences. A month later, the crisp autumn air gave way to the chill of approaching winter. Crescent Grove's trees stood bare, their leaves piled up along curbs for collection. I'd mostly forgotten about the drama. Then, on a random Tuesday morning, I noticed a small piece of paper slipped under my doormat. Expecting another curt notice, I picked it up warily, but it wasn't from Lauren or the HOA. It was a handwritten note from someone anonymous. Thanks for making Halloween fun this year. We've put up with bland harvest decor for too long. Your display reminded us what the holiday could be. Keep fighting the good fight. I couldn't help but smile. Even though it had been just a simple set of mannequins on my lawn, it represented something bigger, a stand against arbitrary controls. And the best part? No children had nightmares, no traffic accidents occurred from spooky distractions, and the neighborhood survived just fine despite not being a friendly harvest cookie-cutter zone. I still saw Lauren from time to time, usually across the street or driving by in her SUV. She rarely acknowledged me, but in her eyes, I sensed grudging acceptance that her attempts to impose a single vision for Halloween had failed. Maybe, in the long run, that was good for Crescent Grove. Perhaps future holidays would allow more personal expression. The board, having learned from the fiasco, might think twice before endorsing such rigid themes. As for me, I stored the mannequins in my garage, already brainstorming ideas for next Halloween, maybe a carnival theme, with eerie clown figures and a fortune teller. Or a haunted wedding scene with bride and groom mannequins, dancing eternally in my front yard. Who knows? Freed from the weight of Karen's iron rule, my imagination soared. Crescent Grove had become a place where neighbors could appreciate uniqueness, even if it meant a few plastic ghosts and spooky mannequins here and there. And so, life went on. I found myself enjoying my new home more each day. The lawn, the porch, the friendly faces, and yes, even the occasional neighborly gossip. But I'd never forget the sweet satisfaction of that Halloween night, handing out candy while kids giggled at the surreal tableau in my yard. Karen had threatened fines, but in the end, I had the last laugh, along with the rest of the community who delighted in my haunted hotspot, while she stormed off in frustration.